You've used a map 1,000 times without thinking about its center. Open any app on your phone, zoom out, notice the grid lines. North is up. Distance is now measured from Greenwich. It feels neutral, as if maps were always built this way. But for almost 1,000 years, an entire civilization built its maps around a different center. Not a capital, not a seat of power, but a single building, roughly the size of a small house surrounded by mountains. The reason runs deeper than religion, into mathematics and a problem that took centuries to solve. Someone had to decide where 0 degrees would sit. None of that is built into the planet. It's built into culture. For early Muslim communities spreading from Arabia in the 7th century, a geography problem appeared almost overnight. Wherever you prayed, you needed to face one exact point on earth, the Kaaba in Mecca, 5 times a day, from Spain, from Persia, from Central Asia. That's a spherical trigonometry problem before spherical trigonometry fully existed. Most people had no instruments for this, no compasses calibrated to magnetic declination, just stars, shadows, and travelers' accounts. So scholars turned a religious duty into a true engine for science. Historian of Islamic astronomy, David A. King, spent decades studying this exact problem. His research shows entire treatises were written on one question: how do you find the Qibla from any city on earth? Mosques in Cairo, Cordoba, and Samarkand needed an answer, and the people solving it were mathematicians and astronomers. This is where the story stops being religion and becomes geometry. To calculate direction across a sphere, you need angles that account for curvature. Islamic mathematicians built on earlier Greek and Indian work, then refined spherical trigonometry because flat geometry kept failing over long distances. That math quietly became the foundation for modern navigation, surveying, and the GPS guiding your phone today. Here's the part that reframes everything. Once you can calculate direction to Mecca from any point, you can flip the problem. Why not build a map where Mecca sits in the center and every other place is plotted by distance and bearing from that single point? That's exactly what happened. Maps emerged with Mecca at the center, concentric circles marking distance, lines like spokes marking direction. Cities weren't placed where they looked right. They were placed mathematically. Compare that to the maps you grew up with. Western maps inherited their structure from Greco-Roman cartography, reorganized around European trade routes, settling on Greenwich as the prime meridian in 1884. A decision made at a conference, by vote, not by physics. King's research, alongside studies of medieval Arabic geography, shows these maps weren't crude symbols, but encoded genuine angular calculations. Meanwhile, the 12th century geographer Al-Idrisi built a different world map for a Sicilian king, blending Islamic geographic knowledge with European ambitions, proof of how fluidly this science moved between cultures. So which map is correct? Neither, really. And that's the twist. Every map is centered on something because a sphere has no natural center when flattened onto paper. North isn't actually up. Greenwich isn't actually the middle. Those are choices made by people for specific reasons. The Mecca-centered maps simply made their choice visible, putting the reasoning right on the page. Modern maps hide that choice behind neutrality. You're rarely told why north is up. You just inherit it. Every map you've ever trusted carries a hidden argument about what matters. Whoever draws it decides what sits at the center. You do this in your own head too. Picture a mental map of your city. What's at the center? Probably home or work, or somewhere you feel safe. Not some objective center that doesn't exist. That's the real discovery hiding here. It's not about Mecca. Every map is a confession of values disguised as a neutral tool. The astronomers calculating Qibla angles weren't unscientific in centering maps on a sacred site. They were unusually honest, building precise instruments for a clearly stated priority. You do the same thing every day, just less visibly. Your phone's map defaults to "You are here," a blue dot always centered. You are, quite literally, the Mecca of your own map. So next time you happen to glance at a map, ask yourself a strange question. What's actually at the center, and who decided that? The grid lines feel like facts, so familiar that almost nobody questions them. But they were built, calculated, chosen. And somewhere in that history, a civilization solved one of geometry's hardest problems just to know which way to turn, 5 times a day, toward a point that mattered more than any other place on Earth. You've used a map 1,000 times without thinking about its center. Now you might never look at one the same way again.